Welcome back to Dominique Medici Art Academy. It's day 9, and today we're working on a value scale. Let's jump in. Here we have our value scale going from 1 to 11. Wait a second. Why is everything suddenly gray? What is going on? Hey, it's you, isn't it? You're playing tricks on me. I'm on to you. Let me just figure this. Okay, that's better. I'm watching you. You better behave. As I was saying, 11 value steps. So when we look at value scales online, we will see that there's, different kinds. There's some people use a 9-step value scale. Some use a 10. I like to use an 11. If we use 11, what we get is our absolute white and our absolute black. So what I like about an 11-step value scale is then 2, 3, and 4 make up our light, 5, 6, 7 make up a midtone, 8, 9, 10 make up a dark, which makes the average of our lights a 3, the average of the mid a 6, and the average of the dark a 9. Let's establish first the lightest light and the darkest dark. And what's kind of nice is that we already get the 1 free of charge. It's the paper. Let's establish our darkest dark. We build this up much in the same way that we were laying in the value on our sphere. So using the side of the pencil, slowly laying in the value, trying to keep it very even and consistent. Now, slightly changing the direction, I'm doing a second pass across the 11, trying to be mindful to keep it very even as it builds up. Now, in this case, I'm using the Strathmore 500 paper. For anyone who's wondering what that looks like, that would be this one. It's very good quality, 100% cotton, very thick Bristol paper. So perfect for these kind of drawings where we're really going to town on the paper, and it can take a little bit of abuse. We'll keep building this up, layer upon layer, slightly varying the angle. Now this may seem like a trivial exercise, but it's not, right? And in fact, none of the basics are trivial, because every other lesson and concept we ever learn is based on them. And it's some combination of the basics. So we really need to feel absolutely comfortable with these basic steps, right? We're learning about materials, which papers work, How would you know that this is a good paper to use unless you destroy some paper in the process of trying to build up a solid square? You just don't know. You just don't know that, right? We get to intimately know everything about the materials we're working with, right? So patience in these exercises is something we should definitely put aside. All right, so this is about maybe 4 passes. Let's start laying it on a little thicker at this point. All right, I'm going to change the angle one more time. All right, if you notice little spots where it's just missing a little too much, you just carefully fill it in. If you notice little bits that are getting a little too dark, then go around it, right? Leave it as it is and go around. this step, you'll start to notice that it starts to look like an old-fashioned black and white TV, where there's little bits of white poking through everywhere. So some of that is totally natural, and we shouldn't try to completely eliminate all of that. But the thing that we do want to kind of keep in mind, that the texture is also super consistent so that it's very even. So even though we have some of that white showing through, there's no particular part that grabs our attention more than another. So some very selective filling in, as well as, just carefully looking for any blemishes or patterns, eliminating that. That's what we want to do from here. But we're getting pretty close to the 11. We just want to go a little further. We have our 1, we have our 11. Now let's get the 6. We do have the guide above to help us as we're creating this value scale. But what's also good is for us to shade this in and guess what is halfway. So in this case, I'm using the 2B, right? I'm using kind of a HB for the first, say 3, 2B for the middle, say 3 or 4, and a 6B maybe for the darkest, something like that. So we shouldn't be surprised if making this scale takes us 4 hours, to be honest. To do it well, which is what we should do, we should definitely do it well. And from that point of view, I think what we'll do is break this video up into 2. It's too much to do in one session, and we want to do it. We want to do it properly. If you've had a little too much coffee, like someone here, then don't be surprised if it's looking a little funky when you first lay it in. It's okay. All we have to do is on our second pass, we just learn how to adjust for our inconsistency in approach and even it up as the layers build up. Not a big deal, right? And usually when we're drawing and painting, we're always responding to some kind of funky looking combination of marks on the page. So it's a good skill to get used to, right? Learning how to gain control when the drawing is going a little wonky on you. Right, so just looking for the light bits, looking for the dark bits, and just evening it up. Okay, there's our first pass. Way too light, still groups with the light, right? It's closer to the light than it is to the dark. So we keep building it up layer by layer each time we finish a pass. Compare it, right? Compare it to the light, compare it to the dark. You'll notice it starts leaning one way or another. And we want it to just feel like it's neither going to the 11 nor to the one that it's just in the middle. And for the most part, just look at this. Maybe even put this away, not be distracted by it. But it's a good exercise for us. Okay, so then we take another guess at this. Is it looking too light or too dark? It still looks a little light. But you see, this is where it gets a little challenging because we don't want some of the pattern we're getting, some of the darker groups of marks are beginning to show up, right? So we want to make sure that we don't just keep getting darker because we're maybe 1 or 2 more passes on this. So we make sure that we even it up before we get there. See, so from that point of view, I'm going to not use the 2B anymore. I'm going to go back to the HB. And my feeling for that, the reasoning on that, is that the HB lays down less material with each mark, which means that it's easier to control it as it builds up because, right, there's just less coming down each time. So I think this is the way to get to the final value we're looking for. Again, having a nice sharp point, if you look at that, it's crazy sharp, right? And that's from that long point AFMAT sharpener that we talked about in a previous lesson. These are so sharp you will totally prick yourself if you hit yourself by accident. So, great for paint drawing with, not great for handling. You see, in this very fine point, it just really helps when I'm trying to fill in and even up this texture. So the important thing with this process of creating this value scale is really enjoy it, right? Enjoy the process. It's one of these rare moments where we can just slow everything down, right? It's nice to pick a time where, maybe it's the afternoon or it's the evening. We don't have other distractions around us. It's this rare moment where the skill itself is not that hard, but it definitely requires attention, especially as we're developing the scale. It's the perfect balance of challenge and attention. So it becomes like a meditation, right? Meditation in and of itself is very straightforward. It's usually not complicated. The instructions are simple. Like just being aware of your breath, for example. Now in our case, we're just being aware of the pencil meeting the paper. It's a very straightforward thing. But if we connect with it, what we notice is like maybe our breath starts going a bit deeper and starts getting a little fuller. We get into a flow. And, it's the endorphins start flowing too. And there's something beautiful about it. I don't understand it, but it's a lovely process. So this is really what's, waiting for us if we approach it the right way. We get a little bit of peace of mind, right? A little bit of connection. So that's the invitation. Okay, how's it looking now? It's getting closer, right? It's pulling away from the light. It's leaning in the direction of the dark, but it's not entirely halfway. It's close. And if I compare it to the 6 above, it's close. It just wants to be a little darker. See if we can even up some of that texture a little bit more, right? It's looking good though. The texture's holding together well. Got a little bit of lightness in the middle here, right? So maybe 1 or 2 more passes and it should be there. And again, that's why it's nice to use a lighter pencil. Each pass is just a little bit darker, right, than the one before. Okay, let's keep going with this. So I'm varying my angle once again. And it's really interesting if you're the touch on the pencil is light, which is what it should be, right? Not heavy. It's amazing that in the tip of the pencil, you can feel the texture of the paper. That's an amazing feeling. Like, the pencil becomes an extension of your attention. Right? We shouldn't be surprised if we start to feel very calm. Our breath slows down. And we start to become aware of the sounds in the room. And a sense of space opens up even though we're focused on this single point in front of us. Okay, we did another pass. And then we look again and we ask ourselves, is it in the middle or is it leaning in one direction? It's close, right? It's very, very close. I feel like we need to do one more pass. Because at the beginning of this lesson, I felt kind of a little bit tense. The day just has a way of, everything takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit unexpected. Things just come out of nowhere. And just by doing that simple little exercise, it's amazing how more focused and grounded, right, and centered. This is what art offers us, right? It offers us this ability to unplug and just sink into that amazingly focused space. All right, so enough of that, and let's take a look. At this stage, we now have our lightest light, our mid-tone, and our darkest dark. The interesting thing is that our lightest light and our darkest dark, if we were to look at most paintings or drawings, it's a very small percentage that's actually those two. Most things are in the middle somewhere, both in life and also in any drawings or paintings. Everything's more or less in the middle. So from the point of view of using this scale in real life, in a way we can say that we don't really use our absolute lightest light and darkest dark that much. So in a way that leaves us with nine values. However, it's nice to have them because you always want that little space to grow into at the end of a work. And right, this will leave us 9 values. So we can kind of use it in either way. We can work with a 9 value scale or we can work with an 11. But realistically, the lightest light and darkest dark are the extremes. So we don't really need them. Now, working with 9 also helps us divide up the scale a little bit easier because, right, our 9, which you'll see would be the 10 previously, it's just a little bit lighter than this. Our 2, right, is just a little bit darker than the pure paper. So in a way, they're easy to mix because they're just a little bit, just a little step in. So that's what we'll do next. And using the HB, let's start on the light side. So we want to be very careful on this one, a very light touch. We don't have far to go, which is why going slower is better. But if we go too dark, it's not a big deal. We can just erase, right? Oh, looks like we got a little smudge on the paper. Okay, then I'm looking at this, looking at the white, and just asking, if I compare this scale and I look at the steps between each one of them, does that feel like the same kind of jump as each one of these jump? It looks a little light still, it's a little blotchy. So we just want to get it tidied up a bit. So there's something you will definitely notice as you're doing this, is that along the edges especially, as we're coming up to the boundary, we might get a little too dark or a little too light. But what we're trying to do is really make sure that we're consistent throughout the entire rectangle. right? That no one bit is lighter or darker. So, right, I'm just going around filling in anything that stands out. Right, and the lighter and more subtle you want to make a thing, the more parallel to the surface your pencil could be, right? Because you get way more control when you're parallel than you do when you're kind of pointed, right? You can just have a super duper light touch. I'm holding it in such a way that it's, just barely scraping across the surface of the paper. And I'm stepping back, taking a look and thinking, I'm wondering if it's already gotten too dark. It's already beginning to possibly group with the 3 up here. Possibly a little dark. So I'm just going to take my eraser and just dab the surface. This should take up any of those darker bits, which might be contributing to that feeling that it's a little too dark. Now again, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, sharpen it up into a point, and just dab out the bits that are the darkest. And we'll see what effect that has on the overall. Sometimes it's just the darkest bits that make it read too dark. All right, and then I step back, take a evaluation again, and it's beginning to look better. It begins to look a little bit lighter. That's looking pretty good. And then we will put in the 9. Now, it may be helpful at this point just to cover up the numbers on the bottom, just in case that's distracting, seeing both sets of numbers. Right, a great way to preserve our lightest light and darkest dark within our composition is to not use it, right? Not use it in the scale that we're actually creating. And then it always leaves you that little bit of space for that perfect highlight and that perfect darkest dark. Okay, we do the same thing with the 9, this time going for, just a little bit lighter than our darkest dark. Right, so also having a piece of paper underneath your hand is also a good way to prevent yourself from marring a drawing if there's something underneath. Because what happens is, right, the graphite begins to build up on your finger, and it's very easy to smudge the surface. Now I'm going to switch over to the 6B again. Okay, so standing back, I'm taking a look at this step to this, and I'm asking myself, does it jump the same amount as from the white to the first one? It looks like these are a little closer, and that there's a bit more of a jump here. So I realize now what we also need to do is number these for the second set. Just so we're comparing the same numbers here. Yeah, this is reading more like an 8. All right, if I cover between, it almost looks like that is the same as that. So it's 2 full steps down, and I need to darken this up just a bit more. Now, with one more pass, it still looks like it's leaning towards this 8 here, but it's moving towards the 9. So maybe just a little bit more, just one more pass, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now it looks like it definitely detached from this one and is leaning towards the 9. The only thing is we're getting a little bit of blotchiness, so, and maybe a little lack of division at the top between the absolute black and this 9 here. All right, so let's do a little recap here. We are working with an 11 value scale. And our 1 and 11 are the absolute lightest light and darkest dark. And because they rarely show up that much in drawings and paintings, it's nice to kind of pretend they don't exist so that we can reserve to use them at the end. That's what I like to do. From that point of view, it's a little easier to use a 9-step value scale because it's much easier for us to divide up the lights, mids, and darks. And yet we still get 9 values where the 2, the 5, and the 8 are averages of that upper strip. It might be a little confusing to think of it this way, but either way we use it, we still come to the same effect. So we continue in the next lesson, and don't forget to subscribe. Do it right now. Thank you.